This year, we want to go deeper into looking at actually what is transformation all about. At Gather, we think about it as spiritual, social, and cultural transformation. And I'm delighted that we've got Sir Peter Heywood with us today. Sir Peter is founder of the Genesis Trust and a founding member of the Bath Christian Action Network. Peter, can I hand over to you today to lead us in our webinar, thinking about what social transformation should we really be aiming for?
Yeah, sure, Mark. Thank you very much. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Great to see you. Yeah, my name is Peter, come from Bath, and I've been involved with Gather right from the very first meeting that was held in Manchester about 10 years ago, I suppose. And in Bath, we've gone through a journey together with Gather over all that period of time. So as Mark said, at Gather, one of the key words that we have is transformation of our cities and of our towns. And it's one of those words that we all know what it means, but probably we all think it means something different. So actually, that's one of the things that we're going to be thinking about today is what do we really think transformation is? What are we aiming for? And how do we know when it's happening? We're looking today at social transformation. As Mark just said, in the next two learning communities, we're going to be looking at cultural and then spiritual transformation. And it's those three which are, I don't know if you see that on there, but that's one of the Gather documents, and that's got the three types of transformation on that page, and we're going to be looking at social transformation. So what it says there about social transformation is this: to see the church working in a more coordinated and strategic way to bring social justice and to help communities to thrive in partnership with civic authorities and other sectors. And I think Mark, move us on one more slide. I think that, yeah, and another one now. Sorry, I forgot to ask you to move them on. If we can just, we should be able to see that. Okay, so yeah, there we are. That's what I just read at the top there. And so the bits that are underlined there are the sort of key words in that statement. And so we're going to be looking at what do we mean, what do we all understand by those words. So we're looking at these four questions. There's lots happening already. How can we be more strategic? And what would be the benefits of this? Then what is social justice that we talk about? What happens when communities thrive? Because that's mentioned. And then who should we partner with and why? And what then happens? And then answering those four questions will set the scene. And then we're going to look at the sort of the big question really is what are good ways of actually doing it? Not just talking about it, but doing it. Let's go on to the first of those questions now. Okay, there's lots happening already. How can it be more strategic, and what would be the benefits of this? So we know that churches all over the country have run parents and toddlers groups, seniors groups, and food banks and all sorts of other things for many years. So there's nothing new about social action in our communities. We've all been doing it and doing a lot of it. But as one looks at that in many places, then a lot of what happens is one church doing its thing in its area, so doing its own thing really well, but not doing it with other churches, so that the model has been, let's start at this or let's start at that and do it in our church and in our community. And that's great, and that's happened for a long time. What we're thinking about here, of course, is joining together in an area across a city in order to achieve more by doing it together. And of course, that's what our unity movements are all about. And that's part of doing it together is sharing premises, because this church might have a better premises than the church next door, so let's do it together. Sharing volunteers from different churches and from the neighborhood, sharing our experience of how to do stuff. And so, and it can be that in an area, different churches strategically are good at different stuff. So if we're not doing it in our church, but we know they're doing it over there, then let's suggest to people, signpost them over to what's happening down the road. And then in that way, we're working all together. So I just think it'd be helpful for us to open up the discussion now just for a little bit, rather than just listening to me. If what I've just said is familiar for you in your area, is there anyone who would like to say, yes, and this is the benefit? Because I've sort of said some nuts and bolts there, but have we actually seen benefits of the working together that we're thinking about there? Anyone, just raise your hand, and all the way through, do raise your hand ever if there's something that you can add. Anyone seen any benefits from churches working together?
Nicole, do you want to share an example?
Yeah, but I put my hand up before you actually specifically. It's not actually churches working together. It's kind of but it's linked with what you were saying about being more strategic. Is that okay to share that?
Yes,
Sure.
please.
So so I work in Voluntary Action Sheffield in Sheffield, funnily enough. So I'm not coming at this from a kind of church focused perspective, and I'm working with a lot of homeless people, people who are addicted, or recovering from addiction, I should say. But I have been connecting with a lot of either churches or church organizations who are working with people in recovery. And one of the things that came up in a recent meeting was people. So this is the guy actually is a Christian. This particular organization in Sheffield is what we would refer to as kind of a safe space or a soft service. So it doesn't offer an actual specific service, but it's a place where it's a place of safety where people can come and drop in, get relationship, have a hot drink, get some of their practical needs met. But this has stuck with me since that meeting, and it was he was basically saying, you know, there's so many good things like soup kitchens or things that churches might run, and not being awful and not wanting to make an umbrella statement, but sometimes they're not actually looking at what the true need is. They're kind of almost like appeasing a sense of in themselves of needing to do something. So they don't necessarily tackle the need. But then what he linked it into, and this was for me, the thing that stayed with me, is that it has to be, or their services are about belonging and not attending, and participating, not just receiving. And I just felt that was just a really key, what's the word? Well, revelation really, in what the priority needs to be, and it needs to be around what that person needs. So I hope that's come across
Yeah, that's
as
good.
I intended it.
Thank you.
So heart's in the right place, but maybe not always the most strategic service. So what about Rachel Bates? Have you got an example?
Yeah, so I work for the local Methodist churches here in Manchester, and I'm involved in sort of like, I guess it's like a toddler group, but there's more to it. We won't go into that. But there's never anything around in the school holidays, which as a mum, I understand that people need a break, but it's infuriating at the same time. So what I wanted to do last summer was try and see if we could provide even just one session per week for the whole of the summer holidays. Just as somewhere to go, £3 a session just to help us cover costs, that kind of thing. And I was going to do it across two of our churches. One of our churches we thought would have some redevelopment work on, and obviously you want to plan it. So I thought, right, well, I can't manage to do everything by myself because we're short of volunteers. So because I'm keen about trying to do ecumenical stuff, in one of the two towns, I emailed all the churches and said, this is, I guess, almost like my vision. Does anyone want to come on board? I did have a church in mind that if they hadn't have contacted me, I would have spoken to them. So the local Anglican church did contact me, and so basically they ended up doing one session every Monday throughout the summer holidays. I did a few in another town nearby at one of our churches. So I said, look, you run it how you want to. All I ask is that we advertise it together, so there's that sense of belonging across denominations, that we have it at the same time. I don't mind what day it is, we charge the same price, just so it's consistent and people can get hold of the idea. And I did go and help at some of theirs. They were inundated with volunteers. Ours, it was just me and one other lady doing the whole thing. But I did go and help theirs, partly because some of our families went to it and there's a bit of consistency again. Consequently, because they loved it so much, because the first session there was over 30 families, I think, at that one. They used to do something pre-COVID, stopped because of the volunteer aspect, but they enjoyed it so much, they're now thinking, what can we do now? So it's benefited them as a church. I guess benefited us because it's just part of the package. And hopefully maybe we could do something similar next summer. I tend to do things in the shorter holidays, but yeah. And it's obviously been beneficial for families. So
that's a really good example of some strategic thinking and trying to get churches to do stuff together. And I'm sure there are other stories that we've got similar to it. Can I just ask another question of us all, which is, and it was the second of the list of questions we saw before, which is, what is social justice? So if I could just say, could everybody think of a sentence that is your description of social justice? And it'd be interesting to see how our sentences are the same or different, and we can then quickly all say them to each other. So don't know if anybody wants to start us off with that, but just we're only have one sentence each, and then just see where we get to. Would that be all right? So yeah, who wants to start?
I'll go.
Yeah, good.
A world that looks more like God's kingdom.
Good. Yes.
I think I'd say meeting the specific needs of individuals.
Yes, good. Any other descriptions?
How about something like equal opportunity and access for all to have their basic needs met?
Very good. Yep.
Setting everyone up for success.
Yes, good.
Fighting for what's right within our society.
Yes, that's good. Okay, so we got a picture, and they're all right, and they're all really important and part of what we understand as social justice, and so to bring transformation, as we can see there at the end, to individuals and families in our communities. Now, what we've got here, this is one I prepared earlier, and we've just said the first three of those. From our point of view, obviously, social justice is also to introduce people to Jesus. And we have to be really keep the introducing to people to Jesus alongside the actual social justice, helping people in need stuff that we do. And as we do those together, we can bring that transformation to individuals and families and communities. So, Mark, can we just go on to the next page, please, with this?
Yeah.
So this bringing the transformation in that way is our responsibility. And if we look at the history of the church, in the 19th century, the church was the focus for bringing social action and helping schools and health systems and so on to develop in the country. And then in the 20th century, that largely moved across to government in the UK as taking main responsibility for health and social care. We're now, of course, in the situation where the government is looking to the church in order to share that journey together. And that's a really good opportunity for us, so long as we do that while expressing our faith and not just becoming an extension of social services. And so that's one of the really important things, that as we do all of this stuff, we need to keep in mind. So as we were talking just now about the need, and one can look at the need in our communities under these 6 headings. So physical in terms of meals, food provision, cookery skills, health needs, exercise needs. Those are all needs that people have, and they're important. In terms of social, friendships, very important, digital inclusion and being part of a real community, having creative activities, volunteering opportunities, all come under social. Spiritual needs, so the whole sense of self-worth that people have, building a sense of faith, getting used to prayer, having real hope for their future, all the mental health issues and all the things that people can do in order to support that. All the financial issues in terms of money management, debt counselling, everything, that getting benefits that they possibly can, getting work experience, getting costs to cover basic costs like heating and clothing, family needs like school readiness, sensory play for babies, and everything that's needed for babies, antenatal classes, everything for going to school, parenting, home visits. There's a whole lot of stuff there. And addiction in terms of personal support and encouragement and building life skills, and real hope for people who are in the grip of addiction, and mentoring for them as well. So the needs are enormous, and we're not all going to solve all of those needs, but as we look at our communities, they're all there, and the church overall has a responsibility, along with local government, to support people wherever they are. But we are doing it with Jesus and introducing people to Jesus, and that's really important. Let's go on to our third question that we put from the beginning, if we could, Mark, which is what happens when communities thrive, because that's what the Gather statement says: communities will thrive. So again, a question for all of us is, how would you measure or notice how a community thrives? So can we just open that up for discussion, see all our faces on the screen? And so, how would we measure when communities thrive? We want it to happen. How do we know it's happening? Anyone start with any idea? Just what would you notice if you think, that's good, that's working?
I almost want to say participation. Yeah. Because it's people might want to get involved, but there could be an apathy or a lack of self-worth, or not wanting to go out. It could be for a whole number of reasons, but if people feel enthused and a sense of belonging or anything like that, it's like people voting with their feet, isn't it, I guess?
Yeah. Anyone else?
Opportunities.
Yeah.
So whether that's opportunities for social connection, positive work opportunities, or volunteering opportunities,
Yes.
across the board.
Okay, good.
On the opposite side of the scale, a reduction in negative things like crime or mental health needs, breakdowns, or all that side of things.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I was saying that the local authority gather a lot of data about a local area, so you want to see some change in things like, I don't know, children missing from school, or exploitation rates, or kids in work, all the things that they measure, some kind of improvement in those things.
Yeah.
I think maybe a reduction in interventions like food banks, CAP,
Yes.
and an increase in preventive schemes that help people to manage money, cook their own food better, etc.
And housing as well. So enough
Yeah.
housing for everyone. So as we look at those measurements, and they're all really important. I mean, the key measurements, as we say from some local government, is education, housing, work, health, and crime. So if we take those 5, I'm sure there are others, but take those 5, then those are all on the government's agenda to improve. And that, can we just go back to the screen, please, Mark?
Yeah.
So they're like the responsibility of government. So if we accept that they are the responsibility of government, then what can the church do in order to support? No, not that one. Go back to the previous one. It's just this question: what can the church do in order to? And we've sort of started to cover it already, but we need to understand that we're working with government, that they've got a lot to do, and we are doing our bit. And so, shall we just think what that means in terms of, we talk about being salt and light in our communities, which is fine. We're using our buildings, because our buildings are everywhere. We've probably got far more buildings than the local council have in every area to do stuff in. So that's really important. We're based in every area, so we can see and notice how our neighbours are and give one-to-one support, much more than the council can, and build local friendships. But most importantly, we can provide people who are struggling with hope for the future and with the self-confidence in order to go forwards. And if we go right back to the early church in Acts 2, and they gave to all in need, and that's what we're called to do by Jesus, is to give to all in need, but to do it alongside the government. We're not in it on our own. So let's look at the next slide, if we could, because we can't do it all ourselves, but we can do it with others. So this thing about who should we partner with and why, well, we should partner with as a church, we should partner with Christian agencies, we should partner with local government, with local health services, and so there's a lot more partnership that we can do, and we do need to be strategic, as we were saying just now, in terms of churches working together. There's something there which I think that in every town and city would be really helpful, is for our churches to actually develop a sense of a common purpose for our place, a shared purpose that we actually say this is it. And because there's this bringing our churches together, this is what our unity movements are really helpful for, is to say, hey, everybody, what is our purpose in our city? And how are we going to do this together? You doing that, you doing that, you're doing that, but together we are doing it all. Because we are in every area. We've got the buildings, we've got the facilities, we're inspired by our faith, and actually we are the best partners that local government could ever have, so long as we're not just an extension of social services, but we are actually there as Christians, helping people to understand the ways of Jesus while we are serving and helping them to do it. Those were the 4 questions that we posed at the beginning. If we could go through it onto the next slide, Mark. Yeah. Now we get to the point of what are some good ways of actually doing it. And we heard 1 or 2 examples before, which is great. So, as I said before, I come from Bath, and so we've got some stories in Bath which we can share with you, and then it would be good, I'm sure, that we've all got other stories and we can share them together and see what we can learn from each other. But I'm going to tell you some stories from Bath now. We have got examples of a city hub, I'll tell you what that is, of community hubs, of a hub network, which is just starting. And then would also be good to talk about good help. I'll explain that a bit later, but it's all about really helping people to become independent rather than just helping them to go on surviving till tomorrow. It's really important to help people into a better future. So we're going to think first of all about the city hub. Can we have our next slide, please? Okay, so this is an example of all the churches in a city, and in Bath we've got about 60 plus churches, all of the churches working together on a single project. This is the Genesis Trust in Bath, which was an organisation that I started in the 1990s, right at the beginning of the 1990s. So we've got a lot of history of it. And this is bringing together volunteers from all our churches to work together to help people in need. And this is mainly people who are in crisis, people who are completely disorganized in their lifestyles, many people who are homeless, people who are ex-offenders, people with addictions. And when I say these things, we know that people who need that sort of support are in every city in the country. And I'm not saying that what we're doing is the only way to do it. Other places do it in other wonderful ways. This is just how we do it. So a lot of these people have got no hope really, and low self-worth. And so we spend a lot of time supporting people who are disadvantaged, who are vulnerable in lots of different ways. And it really, we journey with them and everyone's journey is different, but so that they can gain confidence, can get new skills, can overcome challenges that they've got, and that they can make good choices to go forwards in their lives. And we give them stepping stones all the way and things that they can engage with. And everyone's journey through with us is different as well. And we help hundreds of people a year in that sort of way. We started the project in the 1990s, as I said, and for the first 20 years, we built different projects. This is part of our story. We built different projects that did different things to help people, but they weren't connected together. Not really. It was up to our clients to find their way from one project to another, but that's just how it happened, looking back. Now we focus on the client journey, and we realize how incredibly important that is. And we don't call them clients any longer. We call them guests. We have a whole series of projects that we call the life projects. And here we have a lovely building that it happens in, and we give people a warm welcome and community, sense of community and belonging to community, give them lots of food and meals, lots of personal conversations, training courses, faith courses, lots of people have those, help with benefits and accommodation so they can each go on their personal journey. And it's really important that people understand that. And then we set goals with them, or they set goals and with us, and then we measure their progress, which is and we measure it really well. And so we have lots of factors afterwards where we can say how well people have done. And as we put all that data together, then it shows us how to do stuff better. It helps with fundraising, and we celebrate with people when they achieve those targets. It's all run by professional staff and by volunteers, and it's completely supported by all the churches in the city as a shared project between all of us. So that's an example of a city hub, and you may have other examples a bit later on that you want to tell us about. Let's go on to the next one, which is community hubs. These are hubs, so providing support to people in local areas that are run by local churches. As we see here on the screen, they're places that are lots of welcome. The type of support does vary between different places, and they're usually on church premises. The opening hours are very variable. Different things that happen in different hubs for different types of guests and at different times of the week. So it can be young people on one day, older people on another day, and so on. And the services are delivered by church members and by other local organizations. the people who we are helping are mainly families and elderly people and vulnerable people. So families overcoming all the difficulties that we were talking about just now, older people in terms of isolation and loneliness, and those who are getting to be more frail in years, and people who are vulnerable, as we've just been talking through. And so that's a model which we have started in our area across a number of churches or groups of churches running those hubs individually. We are learning from that and beginning to learn from each other how to set those up and to do them well. Can we just go to the next slide, Mark? Setting up one of these is something that takes a good lot of thinking, and these are the main areas that one has to think about. And each of these has got, we could talk for a long time about how one manages all of these things, but you need to think of a lot of things through before you actually get something going. As Gather, we've got a book that you probably can't see it if it's on the front of your screen, just near the top there. That's one of them. We'll show it a bit later on, which outlines some details about how one can actually manage to look at all of these different elements here, and can work together in order to do that better in our town. Let's move on to the third one, if we may. So this is a network of community hubs. So we've just talked about a hub run by a church or a couple of churches in an area. Now we're talking about a network. So this is local churches that are linked and supporting each other in an area, in a town or a city, in running these networks, these hubs that are delivering into their local areas. And in Bath, we've got a vision for having enough community hubs that they will be, there's no more than 15 minutes of walking from anybody in the city to get to one of our community hubs. We're not there at the moment, but it's just, we would love to see that is possible. And it then becomes a real thing. That's sort of the council really notices, everyone notices, and we're all linked together in that way. And so we are now starting a network of hubs. There are other areas in the country that are much further ahead than we are in terms of a network of hubs, but we are just starting it now. We've got about 15 churches that will be involved in this to start off with, who are doing something of everything we're talking about. And the whole idea is that we're going to we're having dinners so that people can all get together, share experiences, share contacts, provide some sort of joined up support, provide a way that we can all talk to the local authority with one voice and make it easier to make connections with other agencies, and to help each other with practical issues at each of the hubs. And so I'm sure there may be some of us on the call that have got more experience than we have, because we're just starting this, but it's a really important step in order to build our shared social action together. And our role as unity groups, if we're involved in unity groups, is of course to encourage our churches to do all of this sort of stuff, and then at the right time to build a network as well. And now just looking at the time, yes, we've got about just over 20 minutes left. I think what we'll do now, can I just open it up, Mark, please? So does anyone want to comment on any of those three, the city hub, the individual community hubs, or the network of hubs that we've been talking about, in terms of your experience and how it's working? Any ideas you can share with the rest of us?
Go for it, Rachel.
I do want to talk first. It was just to sort of endorse, we don't have a community hub at our church, but just the network of being linked into community hubs. And we have collectives as well around here, like the Trafford Collective. It's just amazing, because you're not always aware as an individual or a church, what's out there for people, the type of support. And I think, I don't know, just in terms of linking in, so I've even been able to myself go on some free awareness courses that I wouldn't have known, you know, it's not to do with Christianity, but things that would be better for our church, whether it's dementia awareness, deaf awareness, different things. And I've even got people now from one of the community hubs emailing me if they find a grant that might be suitable for things that I could apply for things that we might want to do. And so it's nice to have that connection in a very easy, regular kind of way, really. But could I ask you a question about one of the things you said? You mentioned you wanted to have a community hub every 15 minutes walking distance. Now, I could almost guess what the reason might be, but what was your reason for having every 15 minutes?
Just that it's available for everybody in the area who is in need, and they don't need to use their transport, any transport, in order to get there. So that means, actually means half an hour's walk between one and the next. So yeah, it's just in order to be available for everybody, and it's not too far for them to walk.
Is that just in terms of providing help and support, or is that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, out of that long list that we went through of all the things that it could be any of them. It's not going to be all of them anyway.
Yeah.
But there is also the signposting exercise that, as we're joined into networks, becomes easier. We haven't got there yet, but certainly where we would like to get to.
Yeah. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Shall I go?
Please.
Yeah, Nick, go.
So thank you for that, Peter. That's great. I've been thinking a lot about the hubs. Well, I've come across the hubs model recently, but much more in its kind of embryonic form. So I visited a church, a Methodist church, I think, and they have like a drop-in, just a drop-in morning, really. And it's back to what you were saying about the space capital. I think that's such an asset that churches have, that can be put to a lot of good use in a number of ways. Yeah, so I was particularly talking with this lady about how to bring kind of services into the drop-in, because vulnerable people are kind of coming to this drop-in service and drop-in session, sorry, and like whether that's kind of Citizens Advice Bureau or supporting with the kind of benefits and, well, that would be benefits, wouldn't it? Banking, whether that's kind of medical provision coming into hubs. And actually, especially because we're in a city, because either they may not be able to get that support because they won't go into the city centre because they don't want to or can't for whatever reason, or it also decreases the amount of people travelling into the city centre because we're getting a lot of migration of people into the city centre. So I've had a lot of conversations about that. So it's great to hear about that. I think one question I would have for you in your kind of experience was, I felt that was quite a massive list of practicalities, and it made me surprised that kind of these hubs ever got started in some ways. And so I guess I just wanted to ask the question, how do you balance, obviously there are practicalities and things that you want to do to set up for success, but how do you offset that with being like Holy Spirit led and being relevant to the local area and not just being 2 + 2 = 4 for each situation?
I think the answer is that it has to be both. So yes, you have to understand the need, which is a point I think that you made before, in your area, and certainly in the area where we did a lot of analysis on that first of all, but some of it is gut feel. Is this is the right thing? Yeah, and so let's get together and do it. So you've got a building, you've got some volunteers. But then you've got to start thinking about safeguarding. You've got to start thinking about budgets. It's just, you've got to. But you start off with, here's a need, and it's really on our hearts that we want to work through with it. And we see bringing people to Jesus as part of the package. and then add the others as they become necessary. So what we've got from Gather is just checklists, just so you can go through and say, oh gosh, I never thought about insurance or whatever. And so that's all. Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I share an example from Basingstoke?
Yes, please, David. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not personally directly involved, but there's an organisation in Basingstoke called Community Food Link, which has really, I think, been a kind of a catalyst for some of the things you're talking about in its own way, because the vision of Community Food Link is to collect food from the supermarkets and other places that would otherwise go to landfill, and to distribute it as far as possible to people who would most benefit from it. So the people who are in food poverty situations, but regardless, they want to make sure it goes to a good place. So it doesn't just go to people we would think of as being in food poverty. But I mean, there isn't time to share all the things because there's some incredible things that have gone on. But I mean, as an example, in 2022, they collected 60,000 kilograms of food. I'm just reading off a PowerPoint document they've sent me here. They've got 60 volunteers who are drawn from across all the churches, doing 250 hours work a week, and they're reaching 3,000 people across Basingstoke. I mean, in 22, they had 24 outlets, hubs, and these vary. Some of them are churches, some of them are schools, some of them are community centres. And what we're finding is that in some instances, they start off being a hub for Community Food Link, but they're now also a hubs for food bank and for mentoring services into schools and other things. So it's kind of, things are growing organically out of what's been happening here. What else? I mean, they collect from 21 stores and supermarkets, and yeah, it's just I think a really good study in how some things you're talking about can work and take off.
David, that's a really good example for everybody, I think. And it's interesting that all our places are different. We don't actually all follow each other's stories, but we learn from each other's stories. That's really encouraging. Does anyone else want to add some ideas about hubs, networks of hubs, city hubs?
Alison.
Hiya. I just have a couple of questions. Actually, on the single project, so where you were talking about Genesis Trust, is there like a lead church in that, or you have churches working together, but you don't have a particular church who takes the lead on the project in coordinating? Or
No.
And have you found that works okay? How does that play out in practice?
Right from the start, we never had a single church. It started off by bringing volunteers from lots of churches together in order to do stuff, run a soup run on the streets. And then that gradually grew into what do those people who are in crisis on our streets need. And we added another project, then we added another project, and then we formed a charity. And by that time, all the projects were drawing people from lots of churches, and the charity wasn't a church, it was independent of the churches. And then the churches support the charity with financial, with prayer, with volunteers, and it's just grown from there. So we didn't plan it to be what it was now, what it is now when we started. It's just happened as we've grown and learned over the years. So as a charity, we've been drawing volunteers from the periphery of the city, well, most of the churches and most of the people live, into the middle in order to support those who are in need. What we're doing now is through this network of hubs that we're talking about, is actually to support people who are in their own communities, helping volunteers from our churches to support their neighbours, rather than all coming into the middle of the city in order to support people in the maximum need.
Thank you. That's really interesting. And just on the network, the hub network, then, what was the catalyst for that? Was it a particular person, or how have you resourced that in order to kind of get churches linking together, and understanding better what's going on in other parts of the city, and being able to signpost across groups and activities and services that are available?
So I can explain how we've done it, but then Mark might want to explain how it's happened in another place. We've done that by the just personal contacts. I mean, I personally was involved in setting up a hub in our church and then talking to people in other churches, and we encourage each other. But it's all on a one-to-one basis so far. And that's happened over the last few years. And we've now got to the point where we realize that actually, if we network more determinedly between all of us, it'll help. So we are setting up, and we've got a budget for network dinners to happen, and then training and contacts with the council and so on to be a bit more coordinated than they could be if it was one church at a time. So we've got quite a lot of stuff happening in different churches already, and then we're forming a network. Mark, I don't know if you have an example which started with let's have a network, and then it grew the hubs afterwards.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, one is Lincoln, where through conversations with the NHS was born the idea of the nightlight crisis centres. So now ambulance drivers drop people who are struggling with suicidal feelings down at church rather than A&E. And, you know, as that was presented to the churches, 10 churches signed up to do that work. So that was, you know, really exciting. And the results of that have been amazing. And in Cambridge and Peterborough at the moment, again, the mayor was really keen to work with the churches across the county. That's 600 churches. And we've reached out to church leaders from each of the local authorities, the 6 local authorities there, and built a team that are having a discussion around how can all those churches be harnessed to engage with a mental health strategy. So not forcing stuff on them, but enabling and empowering 600 churches to engage with collaborating more around mental health. So yeah, that's been a really good development.
Okay. Anyone else want to add anything about the thoughts we've been having? Okay, Mark, could we go back to the slides? Because the last thing I mentioned about this thing called Good Help. And so let's just see if we've got this up coming here. Good Help was, or is, a phrase that was coined by an organization called Nesta, N-E-S-T-A. Keep going down there. Yes, let's stop there, yeah. And they are, they're not a Christian organization, but they're an innovation agency for social good. Well worth looking at their website. And what they do is to design and test and scale new solutions for society's biggest problems. And so they looked at the whole question of recovery of people who are in need, and they coined this word Good Help. And what it's really about helping people to move from dependency to being independent. We're all familiar, I think, with the project that goes on forever, like the soup run, that all people can come for years and years and years, and it becomes, they're just settled into being me, and I go to the soup run, and with the people running the soup run haven't helped the individuals to actually move forwards into the next step for their lives. So this is all about helping people to move forwards. If we contrast it with the opposite, I mean, nobody uses the word bad help, but if you think about the opposite, there are examples where actually we just perpetuate people's needs because we haven't thought about it enough, and we think we are helping, but we're not helping them into their future. And so that Good Help is about this reinforcing people's dependency and getting self-confidence, being the best they can be, building on their strengths, and the other things on the screen we can see there. We have adopted this absolutely determinedly in the Genesis Trust over the last few years, and the results have been extraordinary. And so people are really moving forwards. and people are really keen to go on to the next step because there's a lot of peer mentoring that goes on, and the benefits for people's lives are wonderful. It also gives us lots of data that because we measure who moves in what way and what steps they make, and that helps a lot in terms of fundraising, which is also a big benefit. Now, so I would suggest that if that sounds interesting, go to the Nesta website, N-E-S-T-A, and have a look at the ways that they say that one can do it. They have, what is it? I think it's 7 different methodologies that they have learned and which they suggest, and we're certainly following them in order to help people to engage in good health rather than in bad health. Mark, can I hand back to you at this point?
Yeah, thank you very much, Sir Peter, for sharing that brilliant presentation. Really logical progression of helping us think through how we can offer help that is good help, that's more strategic. I think you've challenged us to be more ambitious. The need is so great in our communities, and we shouldn't just settle for ignoring that. You've challenged us to think about how we raise the bar of what we're doing as churches, and not to be satisfied with being just busy, but actually to really think about the impact of what we're doing. Is it good help? And you've given us some great tools for that. So thank you so much for that. Sir Peter has over 30 years experience running hubs and working in the community. So we're so grateful for your time. And hopefully, if we can follow up with you at some point for further conversations, we can. That will be all right with you, Sir Peter?
Absolutely. If anyone wants to get in touch through Mark, I'd be happy to talk anytime about ideas.